We are back. Sorry for the Sunday night meltdown, guys, but we're back on board. Systems normal, and we're going to have a massive Tuesday Night Live tonight because we're going to be talking in far more depth about the game on the weekend, considering we didn't get a chance to have a chat about it on Sunday night. But to lead us away, we have Pete. How are you going, mate?
Good, thanks, mate. Thanks very much for that, and welcome everybody. Great to have you all along with us as usual on the Tuesday Night Crowcast. And as Phoenix alluded to there, it was just a bit of a shattering day on Saturday afternoon, and I think it kind of sort of followed suit on Sunday that the whole thing went pear-shaped because it was a pear-shaped weekend. Yeah. It was just an absolute dead set stinker. But of course, we'll get into talking about that, and we'll pull it all apart, and we'll do we'll merge into the wrap that we normally do on a Sunday evening, so that we don't miss out on that, and the Crows don't escape some fairly close analysis in terms of what happened on Saturday. In the meantime, though, we will introduce those regular panellists with us tonight. Macca and Nikki, how are we, guys?
Yeah, good, thanks, folks.
I'm here.
Great to have you along with us, as always. We'll kick off straight away with Nikki's news.
Away you go, Nick.
Well, I think probably the biggest thing is what's happened tonight in the VFL is that Lindsay Thomas has been banned for 3 matches, but it's actually going to work out to 5 matches all up because of the bye that's going on in the AFL for North Melbourne, but also there's the I think the VFL state team's playing, so there's no game on that weekend. So he's essentially been got the 5. And
deserve more.
Yeah, I think most people thought it was 4 or more. And the other sort of news that's coming out is to do with some injury. So you've actually got Fremantle's been hitting the big man's stocks in Apnis actually did his knee posterior cruciate ligament in the waffle, and so he's out. Interestingly, there's 3 Swans players that won't be going to Shanghai. Oh, I wonder why that is. So it's Swallow.
Any Suns players going though, Nikki?
Yeah, you said Swans.
Swans, Suns. Oh, see.
Sorry.
Started with an S. Ended with an N and an S. I got those.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm still shell-shocked from Saturday. We'll blame it on the Crows. We'll just blame everything on them.
Yeah, blame everything on the Crows tonight.
Yeah, so it's... see? Mental blank. You throw me now. I know it's Swallow who's got a knock to his knee. There's also talk that O'Meara is going to be out for a little while because he's hurt his good knee, not his bad knee. So that's not good for Hawthorn, who paid an awful lot for him.
Oh, they'll just bring in a couple of spares, shove them in there, he'll be right.
And he could actually prove to be one of the dud buys of the century. But they paid a lot for him.
They did. And the other kind of news that came out was offer our condolences to Louis Richards' family. He is absolute legend of the game, and it was very sad to hear of his passing yesterday. And also, the South Australian football was rocked a little bit yesterday with the news that Mark Micken, the former Adelaide Crows ruckman and now senior coach at West Adelaide, has Parkinson's disease. But it's really nice to see that he will still remain as senior coach at Westies whilst he struggles through a very, very horrible affliction there.
Yeah, that is sad news. And good to see that, just getting on to Lou Richards, good to see they accepted the offer of a state funeral. I think
they have?
Yeah,
awesome.
They have. So that's pretty fitting, I think.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think somebody pointed out that, all those years in the media, have played so many games that he did, VFL level or state level, and he played it hard, but he never had an enemy. And that says something about the man.
Yeah, it does, and certainly I offer condolences for what they're worth, but I think that certainly when I was a lot younger and getting involved in watching football and being around football, he was absolutely integral to gluing me to the TV screen, and getting me involved, and I think probably my favourite. One of his terms when he used to commentate, we used to call the VFL football, was that at least he's on the right side for a left footer. I used to love that.
Yeah, that was always a good one.
That was one of my favourites from there. But anyway, I mean, he was, and then also in his sort of later days when he did the sports show with Max Walker, great times, and just, and there was just a certain innocence to his humour as well, which I loved, and it wasn't that sort of really sort of blokey locker room sort of, Brayshaw Newman type sort of humour. It was, I don't know, it was a little bit more. I don't know. Word I can think of. It was a little bit more innocent, wasn't it? It was just a real charming sort of a humour, and I think what was one of the jokes that they went with the other night was the one where he had his credit card stolen, but he didn't ask for it back because the guy that stole it was spending less than his wife was, and just silly things like that.
That's quite good, actually.
He was a ripper, Louis, and he's obviously been sort of ill for quite some time, but 94 was a good innings for him, and
it was
an absolute ornament to not only the game but also to the the entertainment industry, which he really pioneered. I think has been well noted.
Actually, I used to love the handball section that he used to have on.
Move the target, yeah. I mean, that was a beauty as well.
I used to love that because
either way you would say numbers. It's like that's not how you say it, Louis. But
third tie, four tie. Yeah, he was a classic. And look, the thing that's forgotten in all of that is that he was a 250 game player.
He was a legend.
One of very few people who can say they were a Collingwood premiership captain.
Yep. No, he was brilliant.
He was a good player in his own right. In his own right.
A callous man there, Phoenix.
Well, I mean, that's just the facts, isn't it? There aren't too many Collingwood captains going around.
And then just to finish off, I've just seen the news that Daisy Thomas and the Blues have agreed that they won't, the waiver that is in his contract, they're actually waiving the trigger.
The trigger, yeah.
Yeah. So, actually, he doesn't deserve it. And he'll put Carlton in a bad spot if it was triggered. And the other news to come out today is the AFL Commission has agreed to leave it as at 8 teams in the AFLW next season, but they will look at expanding to 10 teams from 2019. Geelong kicked up a stink about this because they think they deserve to still be in it because they've actually put in some women's change rooms at the new stadium. That's nice. You counted your chickens before they actually hatched. Well done, Geelong.
I heard that Joel Selwood was remonstrating with the AFL Commission as we speak.
I wouldn't doubt that at all.
That's what he tends to do.
Yeah. But that is good because as we actually saw, the 8 teams was correct. That's where the talent pool was at. And I think you do need at least 2 years to get some new players that are a bit more up and going. So I think that's but they did say that there were teams that put in for bids that didn't get it. They will actually get priority. It'll probably come out of one of those 4, which includes West Coast, St Kilda, Geelong, and I'm trying to think who the 4th one was. But yeah, there was somebody else.
It still wasn't Port Adelaide, was it?
No, they weren't even considered.
Smart play by the AFL there.
Yeah.
Just a quick word on China. Anyone?
Cockwomble.
We'll leave that for the Cockwomble.
There's a few things, and then it'll be all in the Cockwomble.
I don't mind a good meal of Chinese now and again.
All right, we'll probably we'll close out the news there. And as I said earlier in the show, both Phoenix and I said, we didn't get the rap show on Sunday, so I might just back away a little bit here because the 3 experienced, shall I say, the experienced rappers.
Wow.
I don't want to be part of this discussion. I don't want to remember that it happened.
There will be blood. There will be blood.
I will chip in, but I'll let you guys run that.
Pete, this is your opportunity to rip in. All right, so the score was the opposite of what we've been coming to expect. North Melbourne 22-13, 145 to Adelaide 13 goals, 886, a margin of, what's that, 59 points. What the hell? What the actual hell?
that was generous for the way we didn't play.
Can I just kick it off?
Yeah.
I put out a tweet on just second quarter, I think it was. What I could not understand, and what it seems to me is that we're just so we and this might be simplistic, but we're so comfortable in some of the stadiums that we play in that looked to me to be just like playing out somewhere like an open ground like up at Flagstaff Hill or somewhere like that where it's blowing a gale, and you've actually just got to put your mind to the fact that if you've lost a toss and you're kicking against a huge wind, you've got to put your mind to the fact that you may need some extra help in defence, but more importantly you've got to work out what the attacking defensive side of the ground is.
Yeah.
And it just looked to me it was just amateur league football 101 that we did not know, we could not work out what the attacking defensive side of the ground was, which is what the Kangaroos did. And they scored all of their goals pretty much either through the centre corridor or to the outer side or from the outer side boundary. Most often when we were kicking the ball out on the full.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just continually doing it. And what we saw in the second quarter is that the Kangas, quite sort of rightfully played the defensive side of the ground. It was very, very hard to kick goals from that side. Now, is that too simplistic?
No,
Not at all.
that's
No.
pretty much it.
No.
But,
that's
We
part
were
of it.
stupid.
That's the start of it and part of it.
Going with tradition, though, we need to go through some stats first, some head-to-head stats. We actually outdisposed them in the end.
Sorry, Phoenix.
Oh, what?
I
What have
don't think
missed?
there was nobody was actually head to head. There was one team out there and another one that just kind of ran around a bit.
Well, funnily enough, we kicked and handballed more than they did. Well, they kicked more than us, but we handballed more than them. I suppose it was even in the end, but we had pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio kick to handball, whereas they kicked it far more often, tellingly. They outmarked us a little bit. The damning stat, 90 tackles to 50 from the team that kicked 10 goals 4-0 in the first quarter. Source got touched up in the ruck. The frees were a little bit... I didn't think the umpires had a very good day, but I think it was... those games
equally bad.
Well, I think those games are probably unusual for umpires too, and I don't know whether they handled the conditions terribly well. Our disposals per scoring shot blew out from our usual 11 or so to nearly 19 and nearly 30 disposals per goal. It was 79 to 56 inside 50s. Now, some interesting stats. Contested possessions. We ended up winning contested possessions 168 to 161, and yet we were horrendously down in that first quarter. Uncontested possessions were fairly even. Our disposal efficiency was shit, 66.6. Our clearances, we got belted 47-34. It was 10-3 inside, 10-3 centre clearances at the 12-minute mark of the second quarter. And you can say all you like about the wind and defensive side and all that sort of stuff, and I don't disagree. But the simple fact is that we couldn't get our frickin' hands on the ball in the middle. And that, to me, led to a lot of their bloody first quarter onslaught. And aside from that, the rest is all rubbish, really. So really the two things for me is the tackle count. That just displays our intent and our loss of the clearances. And we've been a good clearance side this year. So that, to me, just spells one word, and that's intensity, guys.
Yep, there's no doubt about that. But what the point that Peter raised about the wrong side of the ground, and when we were clearing the ball, we're going to the attacking side, which was absolute lunacy and madness. That has a reflection on two groups of people. One is the players, which dumb as dog shit to keep on doing it, and what were the coaching staff doing? I just can't work that out. So that's part of it. The second part of it is the midfield, as you were saying correctly. They sat and camped on Rory Sloane. So Rory Sloane was absolutely unsighted in the first half. I think he had either 4 or 5 possessions. I can't remember which, but they're so few they're not memorable. And on top of that, also the game from Walker was an absolute disgrace by his own standards, really.
He tried too hard, and it just went the opposite way.
Yeah, but I think what we've got there is the Scott formula was handed from one brother to another, and I thought they played that part of it. But it's a combination of so many things mired up in this game. One was that unintelligence. The second one is the camping on our two key players, if you like. The formula used by one Scott pass to another Scott, and our guys rolling up there. And Pete mentioned that it's like a country-style ground. They looked like they were out there for a stroll in the country rather than having the intensity to play an AFL match. And they didn't have the intensity to play an AFL match. And, boys, I hope some of you are listening, because I want to tell you, you were bloody pathetic, absolutely disgraceful. And if you want to call yourself an AFL player and go out there like that, well, I mean, Riley and I've been pumping up your tyres, boy, but you hardly got a sniff.
I actually thought, I'm watching that game and I'm thinking, no, this is the type of game, because we know Riley Knight can go in and get that hard ball, and he has that desire. You know, he's in that team ahead of Miller because Miller has been dropped for general soreness. This is where he should come to the fore. And he was unsighted. Rory Atkins, I love the guy, but he is a front runner. And he needs to learn to go and get the hard ball at times, because that's what we needed, was those type of players. And as you said, we kept kicking out in that first quarter, out to the right-hand side every time, because that's where our midfield kept setting up. It's like,
yeah, but they would have, but they would have done that on instruction, Nick.
Yeah.
To me, it all boils down to intent. When we lose clearances, when we're second to the ball, our whole game plan falls away, because we start getting panicked in close. We can't move the ball sideways. Our forwards come up too high, and then you get the situation with a Scott Thompson or a Corey bloody Enright or whatever. It's always the same. Because our forwards push up too high, we end up with a mismatch down back, 1-on-2, and because we run out of options, we just have to kick it, and we kick it down their throats all the time. It comes back down to intent. The way to beat the Crows is to beat them at clearances. It's as simple as that. Yep. Everything else stems from that, in my view.
Interestingly, when Lynch got concussed and went off, our delivery, once we actually started to get it through, we were actually getting it through better, because they sat on Lynch and they sat on Sloaney, and so we sent Sloaney to the half-back line, or to be that extra midfielder through, and put Laird in the middle. And we actually started to play a bit better, because that was a different look that they weren't anticipating. But we couldn't go on with it.
You can, Nikki, what you can do is, I mean, if you extrapolate all three over the 4 quarters, then, after quarter time we outscore them. And Finn went through through some of the stats, which, things like contested ball, we end up not looking too bad. But, we still play crap. The game's gone at quarter time. And Phoenix is absolutely right when he talks about intent, because you can talk about it till, we can go through all of the stats, we can go through, the conditions, we can go through a whole lot of stuff. But you know what? When you're 10 goals 4-0 at quarter time, you have not turned up to play.
No, that's exactly right.
There cannot be any other explanation for that. 10 goals 4-0. There is no other explanation for that.
I don't even buy that we outscored them after quarter time bullshit, because
that means nothing.
We outscored them by 3 points, and it was really only the second quarter that we outscored them with any sort of meaningful margin. And we've got to remember, yes, North weren't playing too bad. We're 6 and zip at that stage, and North are 1 and 5. Yeah. We were predicting pre-game to beat this mob by, anywhere between 5 to 10 goals. So we bloody should have outscored them. The fact that we only outscored them by 3 points over the course of the second, third and fourth quarter is not something to hang your hat on, in my opinion.
No, absolutely not. I agree.
For me, it's actually something we've been discussing about how our starts of games, and they've been a bit slow and everything else. Well, hey, guess what, guys? You just got a perfect example of what happens when you're not switched on from the start. You got your asses spanked.
But hey, wait. At least the fact that we outscored them by 3 points after quarter time means that we obviously had the pike reset at quarter time.
No, we actually just started to play football a little bit and they slacked off.
But, you have a look at the 22 players on that
Who
list.
said that? Honestly, if somebody said that, they're going to the cockwomble.
There's 22 players on that list. How many players would you have given a pass to? I've only given a pass to probably 4 players.
Hardigan?
4?
All right, tell me your 4, Macca, and then we'll run through some individual stats.
Matt Crouch definitely gets a pass. I thought Matt...
Fail.
No.
Well,
Fail. Epic fail.
Well...
Keep going.
Yeah, poor delivery. Bad choices.
38 times he got the bloody thing, which is more than...
Then did what with it?
At 63% disposal efficiency. Keep going.
The others are so shit that's good.
All right, let's keep going.
Richard Douglas, I thought, played a good game.
Yeah, jogged instead of chased in the first quarter. Yep. Keep going.
Rory Laird, I thought, played a good game.
Yeah, I could probably accept that.
And I thought Jacobs...
He was still turning it over a little bit.
Jacobs at least tried his...
No. Jacobs was towed up.
I know he got beaten, but at least he tried.
No. The only other one I'd give a pass mark to was Jake Lever. I thought he tried.
Lever. No, you're spot on, Phoenix. He's the only one. I'd give one player a pass mark, and that was Lever. He was the only person to pass mark for me.
I have issues with him in the first quarter because they were doing what they did the week before, which was everybody was jumping up and nobody was staying down. So there was no communication going on in that back lines.
I'm with you, Nikki.
Lever was doing that as well. I didn't mind Hardigan's game. Yes, he got beaten, but God, he kept bloody trying, and he actually kept trying to attack. A couple of times, he actually made the right move, and it didn't quite pan out because the rest of them around him weren't helping out as they should have. So he's one I would actually give close to a pass to.
Yeah, all right, let's run through some individual stats, and we can discuss them as we go along. And we can start with the leading possession winner for us in Matt Crouch, who had 38 touches, 12 kicks, 26 handballs, took 5 marks, only laid 4 tackles, had 4 inside 50s, only the 15 contested possessions in that 38, so he had 23 on the outside for a disposal efficiency of 65%. He had 5 clangers, 7 clearances, so he was our main clearance winner, which you would expect. I did not like Matt Crouch's game one bit.
I disagree with you. I at least think the guy tried his guts out, and that's something that some of them didn't do.
The problem, Macca, with Matt Crouch is that if he's going to get the ball 38 times and he's going to handball it 26 of those times, and 23 of those times they're going to be in uncontested situations, he has to hurt the opposition, and he just doesn't.
Nope.
Just doesn't.
Agree with you completely, Phoenix.
Yeah, it's not easy to say, except there are another 21 bloody players out there not helping him either.
Yeah, no, that's fine, but this isn't an
then
isolated
he
incident.
Give it to him.
This isn't an isolated incident, Macca.
One player can't beat 22.
Macca, this isn't an isolated incident. He has similar. There's only been one game this year, and that was against Richmond. Was it Richmond or maybe the week before, where he actually had some meaningful metres gained? But every other game this year, he's handballed far more than kicked.
Yeah, Richmond.
Yep. Handballed far more than kicked. His disposal efficiency has been poor. And what other team would have a player allow an opposition player to get 38 possessions and just not even care, not even play close?
Do you know how many...
Nobody cares about Matt Crouch.
Phoenix, what was the overall efficiency disposal of the team?
It was 66.6.
So he's under that.
Well,
I'm not sure. I'm reading it off the screen.
Okay, because I remember at one stage they were quoting 53% for the Adelaide.
I know.
Yeah,
I think in fairness to Matt Crouch, he has had a few good games this year, and I think that we know his limitations. I think he's worked on that, and I think that his 600 odd metres gained against Richmond was a good indication that he's working on it. But under pressure reverts to type, and to be honest, if we're going to start talking about that particular kind of player that Matt Crouch is, I think that you really need to have a conversation about his brother.
Yep.
Because brother was rat shit on the weekend.
Let's look
and I reckon that's actually putting it kindly.
Yep.
And to see him on the Don't Come Monday on bounce,
Yeah.
And my 8-year-old sitting there and he's just cracking up laughing at Danny Frawley's Don't Come Monday, and you've got Brad Crouch running into an open 50 and kicking the ball to under no pressure, just running free, and just kicks the ball out into open space and they measured. Did you see the measure they had on it? About where Adelaide players were, how far they were from the ball. It was the most ridiculous bit of play I have ever seen.
Thank you, Pete, because you've only just confirmed my argument. Because if you're going to compare Matt to the rest of the team, what are you going to say about the other players? Because
I think that
we're getting there.
Matt's done enough this year to probably escape, the blowtorch because, but question mark over him under pressure reverts to type. Okay, but it has shown signs of improvement. But this other one, Brad. When are we going to see any sign of improvement from him?
No, it's not.
I don't think we're going to. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that he's incredibly overrated. He's slow. He's slow as a wet week.
Yep.
He offers nothing.
Yep.
And he's embarrassing. Like he was embarrassing on the weekend. Some of his play.
The only thing he does is what is easier to do, and that's inside defensive work. So his tackling in close is probably the only acceptable part of his game. But for an inside-out midfielder who's supposed to be elite, he had 12 kicks, 12 handballs for 24 posies. He had 5 tackles. He had 4 inside 50s. He only had 5 contested possessions. This is from our premier midfielder. Bearing in mind that how many does Sloaney normally get? And Sloaney still had 11 contested possessions on the weekend, even when he was getting blanketed. Brad Crouch had 5 contested possessions, so he had 20 uncontested possessions. Only 15 of his total possession count were effective for a percentage of 62.5%. He had 6 clangers. He only had 2 clearances. He needs to be dropped.
Well, his performance was disgusting. I agree with you.
He needs to be dropped. He's showing nothing. Surely. Showing nothing. Richie Douglas. 17 kicks, 13 handballs, 30 disposals, 4 marks, 2 goals, 4 tackles, 3 inside 50s. He had 10 contested possessions, but here we go again, 63.3 disposal efficiency, 8 clangers, 5 clearances at least. I thought Douglas would have been probably my third best of a bad bunch.
Yep, and when we talk about the efficiency of these guys, you've got to remember that through the lack of help through a lot of the teammates, these guys are under a lot more pressure than the ones that are trying than they normally are.
Macca, why are you defending these guys?
I'm not. I'm defending about 3 or 4 of them who I thought had a fair dinkum crack. Now, they mightn't have done
they were still
nobody
Hang
had
on.
a fair dinkum crack.
I thought Crouch, Douglas, Led did have... Those 3 definitely did.
I saw Douglas jogging and allowing a North player on the outer wing in the first quarter. In the first quarter, on the outer wing, he was jogging while a North player ran past him. At no stage did he even look like he was going to make an effort to chase and put pressure on. Even if he was buggered, it's the first quarter and he was jogging. Unforgivable. Unforgivable.
These blokes that I'm talking about, I'm not saying that they played fantastic, but they were our better players.
No, but you said they tried their guts out.
They didn't.
And they didn't. Richie Douglas did not try his guts out.
We're going to differ on those because, I think there's about 20 players, not 20, about maybe 18 players there that you can just tear to shreds.
Okay. If you're coaching a team back in the day, right, and in the first quarter, one of your premier midfielders, a past club champion, and your first rotation midfielder jogs instead of chases, what do? You drag him, don't you?
Yeah, I would, but depending on the circumstances, whether he'd been involved in maybe 3 or 4 contests before that.
I'm telling you, he hadn't. He hadn't. The ball was rebounded from our forward line, from their half-back line. Douglas was in the centre square. The ball was coming out the outer wing, and Dougie did not make an effort to chase. That's in the first quarter.
If you're going to tear to shreds these guys, what are you going to say about the others?
Well, we've already said Brad Crouch should be dropped. Rory Atkins, another one. 10 kicks, 10 marks, 10 handballs, 20 disposals, 3 marks, only 2 tackles in a losing team. 6 contested possessions, 15 uncontested possessions. At least he used it a bit better than most. He went at 80%. No clearances, a couple of clangers. Just a nothing game from Rory. And Pete's exactly right.
But now we're talking soft cocks. That was a soft cocked effort.
Absolutely. Pete is exactly right. He's a front runner. And
that was me.
That was you, Nikki. He is a front runner. And when things aren't going the way of the team, he's got to learn to be able to actually put his hand up and make a difference instead of just being on the end of a chain.
Argument for me about him. I think his effort was indefensible.
What really worries me is, did anyone really notice a hell of a lot of difference between the first quarter on Saturday against North Melbourne and the first quarter in the semi-final against Sydney? And bearing in mind, you're pretty much the same group of players, and it just really worries me that a team comes out, fired up, in the first quarter and exerts, massive, are motivated to just put sort of massive, incredible pressure on our side, and they just fall away like I don't know what. It's a real worry because it's the same group of players. It happened against Sydney in the semi-final, and that to me it just looked like a repeat, except the fact that North got a few more scoring shots.
I'm glad you raised that point because that was what I was going to raise. The fact that it looked like an identical repeat of our start against Sydney, that we're just incapable of stopping and another side when they put intense pressure.
Well, let's just bookmark that for a moment because I want to get to that after we've gone through a few more stats because you raise a good point. Let's just have a look at a couple of other midfielders.
Sure, sorry.
No, you're right. It's fine. We'll just we'll put a little. Oh, I hate that saying. I won't even do it. We'll talk about it later. Rory Sloane got blanketed 9 kicks, 9 handballs for 18 disposals, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 2 inside 50s. He still had 11 contested possessions, went at 72%, a couple of clangers, 4 clearances, quiet game, and Rory's developing a reputation, in my view, that he can be tagged out of the game.
I love Rory, but I'll tell you what, that first half of his is totally unacceptable. The fact of a player of his quality, I don't care if you're being tagged or not. At least you got an opponent, but you're both going for bloody football. At least you can get more than bloody four possessions.
Right. So who was tagging him, Macca?
Gibson.
It was Sam Gibson.
Yeah, Sam Gibson. 20 disposals, 2 marks, 6 tackles. 4 inside 50s. What else has he got? He's had 14 contested possessions. He hasn't used it terribly well, 65%, 4 clearances. This is the problem that I've got. You've got a bloke who's been assigned to tag another bloke out of the game, and he's actually had more of an impact on the game than the bloke he's been tagged out of.
Absolutely.
Rory's got to be better than that. He's in Brownlow contention, and Sam Gibson, I wouldn't even know what he looked like if I passed him on the street.
A better player than most people think. He's a player that generally knocks up around about the high 20, maybe 30 possession mark, but he's dedicated his game this time as a cutout player, rather, and he still ended up with 20 possessions even doing that.
Yeah, but we've been calling Rory Sloane the beast and, unstoppable and early Brownlow favourite and all the rest of it. Rory's got to be better than that. And
he was a pet, not the beast.
And it does come back too to what you were saying before about players around him. We're hopeless when we used to be hopeless when Dangerfield got tagged. Remember that game against Melbourne when Bernie tagged Danger out of the game? Where was the block? Where was the shepherd? Where was anyone giving Bernie a bit of shit? And the same this time around with Gibson. Where was the blocking? Where was the intent to free up your star player? There was none.
Whereas,
it was every man for himself.
He's the one doing that for the rest of our midfielders because it was being done to him. So North had actually figured out this is what we're doing, that we're using him to block. So instead, they got the better of it. And the rest of the midfielders didn't know how to cope and didn't switch it.
Yeah, but they're not kids.
Yeah, but the smartest thing actually Rory should have done was to taken himself away from that midfield.
Yeah, but when the midfield's going so poorly, you don't want your best player out of there. And
no,
the
way it was going, we needed a change up. And as soon as we actually did that, and we put Laney in the midfield that started the third quarter, we looked a lot better.
Yeah, but
it didn't last long, but we did actually look better for a small period of time.
I agree with Felix. That's a cop-out. Rory's got to be better than that, because if he's going to be one of the gun midfielders, if he wants to be, and I know he has his desire to be the captain of the club, if he wants to be seen as a virtual captain of the club, he's got to do better than what he did in that game. I thought that first half was a disgrace.
And I also think there's an issue of intent with Sloaney as well in these circumstances, because players, let's look at a bloke like Tommy Lynch or even Nick Revolt, right? They're skilled players, no doubt, but their biggest weapon is their tank. Now, Rory is a gut runner from way back.
Yep.
Now, if Rory's got a tag, Rory's just got to say to himself, I'm going to run this guy into the ground. Back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. But what I see from Sloaney is that he also drops his bundle and he doesn't run. And that's his biggest weapon.
Yeah, I saw it the same way. I know he lifted his game up when he's moved out of the midfield, but we needed him in the midfield because we were getting done.
Now, the interesting thing is we only had 6 players on the weekend that had double-figure kicks and only 7 players who had double-figure handballs. So the following midfielders had less than double-figure kicks or handballs. David McKay, 8 and 8. Curtly Hampton, 5 and 9. Charlie Cameron, 9 and 5. Brodie Smith, 9 and 3. I'll include him. Riley Knight, 3 and 5. I mean, for God's sake, this is a team that's on top of the table. Are we relying on so few players, and do we have so many downhill skiers in that midfield group? Is it a matter of inexperience? Because we do have a couple of newer players in there, like Hampton and Knight. Or was it just one of those things?
It's not just one of those things. I mean, if you want to get, if I can go back to, well, if you want to talk about any more players, let me know. But cut me off and we'll go back. But when you say one of those things, it's not one of those things. And I heard Daniel Taylor, you interviewed, and you talked about the fact that he hadn't been involved with a quarter like that before. He never wants to again, and blah blah blah. Well, he has, and it happened, and it's this team. And I think that what we've got now, and as supporters in the back of our mind, we know that this team has the propensity to just come out and basically not turn out and be steamrolled. We know that can happen at any game.
It happened last week. It happened against Richmond.
It was just the fact they kicked 5 goals against Richmond.
Yeah, that
kept them in the game. But yes, Richmond came out and kicked 6 goals, and it's happened a few times this year already. But the semi-final against Sydney, there it was laid bare the character of this side, and then the capacity to respond to intense pressure in the first quarter. They just got blown away, just kicked off the park. The game was over at quarter time. It's exactly the same thing. And that's this side. It's this team.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a team with a lot of ability, but not a great deal of intensity.
And I don't really want to talk about any more stats because they're all shit. But so let's follow this chain of conversation, because I agree, Pete. And in my mind, what I'm thinking after the weekend is that nothing has changed with this team. That we did miss the boat by not bringing in another midfielder. That we are treading water, and that we will continue to get found out in big games, big high pressure games, because we don't have the big bodies in there, and we don't seem to have the intent or the ability to remain focused and step it up a notch when the pressure is on. It's the only way that Adelaide ever gets beaten is if a team comes out and smashes us in the midfield. It's the only way.
Well, I still come back to Rockcliffe. There was talk about he isn't the right type of person. Well, the right type of person for this club is somebody who can get the effing ball.
He would be perfect.
And he would, and he thrives on that stuff. He gets tagged every week. There's always somebody trying to block him and stop him, and he ends up getting bloody 40 possessions. Now, so you might argue that some of them aren't quality possessions, but at least he's getting the ball. And if you watch the guy, he does a lot of damage overall. And I just can't believe we weren't interested in him.
Yep. Too much credence played on a couple of off-season comments that really have no bearing on his ability to get the bloody football, in my view.
Absolutely.
You know what, Phoenix? That's exactly the words. This is what it all boils down to. In that first quarter against Sydney, and I've said this before, is purely and simply could not get hands on ball.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is exactly what happened against North Melbourne. Could not get hands on ball. It was an absolute replay.
Let me read you some stats from a player, and you tell me who it is. He played in a losing team, and what did he get? He got 21 kicks, 11 handballs, 32 disposals, 7 marks, 2 goals, 1, 11 tackles, 6 inside 50s. What else did he do? Let me just get this up. He had 12 contested possessions, went at 78% disposal efficiency, had 7 clearances. Who am I talking about?
Rockcliffe?
Tom Rockcliffe against Sydney. Brisbane against Sydney. So Brisbane were out of that game for a long time, and yet, I mean, look at the scoreline. It's not dissimilar. 20 goals to 12, Sydney versus Brisbane. And Tom Rockcliffe has put up stats like that, and you tell me he's not the right player for our club? You got to be fucking shitting me.
Yeah, I watched that game. I was thinking, I wish he was in our bloody side. And I just can't believe we weren't interested in, and we weren't. We know that we weren't. And yet, you've got to have the type of player that when the absolute intensity is thrown at you, you can handle it. And these boys can't.
But to be fair, Macca, we weren't the only club that wasn't interested in him.
No,
there was, yeah, I know, but obviously there was a price that was being put on his head by him and his manager that just
wasn't the price, Nikki. You heard what was said.
Yeah, but I think that was part of it.
No.
Well, as it turns out, the price for Gibbs was too high. The price for Rockcliffe was too high, and as I banged on about all off season, and everyone gave me shit about it, you know, we weren't prepared to pay the price. And as it turns out, it looks like once again we're going to hit the finals without a premiership midfield. Simple as that. Simple as that.
Yeah, but this is definitely not a premiership midfield. It's barely at the moment. The way, if that was an example of what we're going to get. You can forget us in finals because we can't win finals with a midfield that won't perform under that extreme pressure which finals brings. This wasn't even a final. We couldn't withstand it at all.
So we all glad that we picked Gallucci and paid Jenkins $500,000 for 600 years.
Oh, and Brad Crouch. What do we pay Brad Crouch for however many years? You know.
Yep. This is. I mean, I hate to jump the gun because there's a long way to go in this season, but the reason it shits me so much is because we've seen this for the last 18 months, haven't we, Pete? It's been like this for the last 18 months. We lose the same every time.
Go back to the 2015 semi-final against Hawthorn. Same thing. Didn't turn up in the first quarter. Blown away by quarter time.
Yep.
Same thing. Same team.
Yep. And until we can actually withstand that and at least break even when we have the absolute kitchen sink thrown at us, and that's what these teams are doing because they know that they knock us out the way. Then they gives them a chance of winning the game. And until we can withstand that, and at least break even, we've got not going anywhere.
Yep. So, one more negative, and then maybe we'll just finish it off on a slightly hopeful note. Let's talk about Tex Walker a bit. Because this whole standing behind and trying to nudge the other bloke under the ball and doing the cheapies and giving away frees and all the rest of it, didn't impress. It's starting to shit me off, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that was a poor man's effort on Saturday. The 3 times he gave the frees away for, but it wasn't the only time he was behind. They were the times that he interfered with the player in front, and Tex had to make some sort of impact, although the way the ball was kicked up, they're like if you take Brad Crouch's kick as an example, or no.
Oh my God, they're giving away 50s as well. Not just free kicks, they're giving away 50s as well. You know.
Yeah.
No, but you know, it was a poor effort by Tex, and he actually has at least had the guts to come out and say he played a shocker, and he's got to come out and...
He can't say much else. He's had 4 kicks, 3 handballs for 7 disposals, taken 4 marks, kicked a goal, had 2 contested possessions, 5 clangers. Like, you know, I know he plays up forward and all the rest, but he's a lead up forward, and it wasn't only what he didn't do, it was also the undisciplined stuff and the lazy stuff that he did do.
Yeah, the other thing that we must point out though, we I think Pete mentioned it before. One of you did, I think it was Pete. We lost our forward structure totally.
What's that coincide with? The inclusion of a particular person? Man with half a rib.
Well,
Our forward line hasn't looked the same since he's been back in.
Since we've lost McGovern, and that's unbalanced us as well. And but yeah, no, like a whole lot of guys, he offered nothing.
The one thing I will say about our forward line and the umpiring is, what were they looking at every time Eddie Betts was being pushed over well off the ball by North players?
They played one or two, but
there's one they pushed him into the fence.
Yeah,
Nicky, there were a lot of. If you wanted to be critical, you could have criticised the umpires on a lot of scores. But if you have a look at our game, it was so bad.
Oh yeah,
our players, the umpires look good by comparison.
So answer me this, guys: is there room for Andy Otten and Josh Jenkins in the same team?
No. Not down the same end.
We needed Andy to go down back.
So not down the same end. If Andy's going to play, he's got to be. In Jenkins there, Andy's got to be down back.
Well, Otten played in the ruck, played up forward, like swung back at times. Wasn't a great player, but in terms of his value to the team, compare his stats to Jenkins, particularly his defensive stats. I would at the moment, if I was picking my centre half forward or my second tall up forward, I'd be picking Andy Otten over Josh Jenkins.
On their performances on that particular game, yes, you'd have to say that. Now, is that going to be the same every week? Let's see.
And for about $500,000 over 2 years.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. No, you're exactly right, Pete. And this has been my argument about Jenkins all along. You know, he doesn't bring anything that a bloke who's been out for 960 days doesn't bring. Anyway.
If you put Crouchy together and along with Jenkins, we could have easily swapped that for a Rockcliffe and done very well.
All right, so we all know that we're going to come out next week and we're going to play Melbourne and we're going to smash them into the Adelaide Oval deck, because that's what we do.
I wouldn't be bet money on that.
Yeah, because that midfield is a very good contested ball and clearance midfield.
They
don't have a ruckman, but they then get an extra midfielder.
You know we'll come out and respond and everything will be restored to normal, Nikki, and it'll be another smoke screen.
It won't be restored in our minds.
Until the next time.
To me, the only game that redeems my hope in any sort of result this season is Geelong at Cardinia Park. That's the only game that means... probably Western Bulldogs later on, even though that's being played over here just because they're a quality team. But until we beat the Cats at Skilled Stadium, I don't care. I'm almost not watching, because I know we'll win most of our games. I know we'll finish top 4. But unless we can prove ourselves in a pressure cooker situation, I don't really care anymore. And I don't know why the players don't see that, and the coaching staff don't see that.
What you're really saying is it doesn't matter what we do in the minor round, it's going to count for naught, because when it comes to the pressure cooker time of a final, we'll crumble again under that type of pressure.
And we did talk about this last week.
Yep.
That for all of the hoo-ha that was going on with undefeated for 6 rounds, really, those of us who have followed this team for year in, year out, know that until we come up against finals type pressure, then that's really the only time we're going to be able to prove it.
We were 28 points down against Hawthorn before we kicked into gear, and I would suggest they dropped off a smidge. We were nearly had our scoring shots doubled by Richmond in the first quarter, and the only thing that changed in that game, apart from some changing up in the midfield and one back in defence, was their intensity dropped off. Richmond couldn't maintain the intensity. So
Port Adelaide?
Port Adelaide nearly got over the top of us. They were 1 goal down, like minutes into the last quarter, and we ran over the top of them. And that might be down to class or over effort. Who knows? But
GWS, the start of the game.
Every time we get matched or beaten, not just beaten in statistically beaten, but when we get beaten in terms of our intent and our desire to win the ball and to put our body on the line. I mean, I hate seeing blokes like Douglas and Brad Crouch and that squib contest, and that's what they did. Crouchy squibbed a couple, Rory Atkins squibbed a couple where they just did not put their body in. They weren't willing to put their body in. What the hell was going to happen in September?
Well, we'd get slaughtered if we go with that. If we went in a final with that attitude, we might even say Port Adelaide the embarrassment of that 119.
But it's not attitude. It's not a question of attitude anymore, Macca. In my opinion, it's a question of personnel.
Well, you don't find personnel hanging off of trees. That's the problem.
Well, we had one dangling off a tree last season, possibly two. We could have made a massive play and got two big-bodied midfielders with a bit of class about them into this side playing this year. We could have. It would have cost us money and it would have cost us picks. But instead, what we've got is more of the same and a lad in the twos that looks like he's a long way off it.
Well,
so what would you prefer?
I'll tell you what, I would have loved to have the move that you just said. If we'd got Rockcliffe and Gibbs into this side, then we would be talking about a flag.
So why didn't we do it?
I'm not in charge.
We were relying on organic growth.
Yeah, which has been shown up. No one has grown. No one has grown.
Oh, somebody pissed on the garden.
Well, I don't know. I know it seems like a big reaction from one loss and we're 6-1 sitting a game clear on top and yada, yada, yada. But I said on Scorpus's show on Thursday night last week that I wasn't as confident because the ground was going to be wet, the weather was going to be cold, there was going to be a wind, and North were going to come out with intent. And it's exactly what happened. It's so predictable, isn't it, Pete? You set your clock by it just about what's going to happen.
Yeah, look, I have to be honest and say I didn't see it coming this week, but I certainly, in the back of my mind, I just couldn't dismiss that Sydney game. And I know I keep harping back on it, but you just know that eventually, or you hope that it's not going to come. But, at about 4 or 5 goals down, you're thinking, here it is.
Yeah,
we're back. We're
right.
back there. I feel. You know what? I feel like this sort of. When you're in that relationship and someone's left 2 or 3 times for the same reason, and they're sitting there saying, "We're back here again."
Yeah.
How can we be back here again? But that's where we were.
That was dead set deja vu, wasn't it, Pete?
Yeah, it was.
Well, and to me, you can't fix that with training. To me, that's a mindset, and to me, the only way you fix that is personnel. You have to change your squad because that's ingrained into the squad. These blokes have been going on about how good it is to be playing together for the last few years and how they're really close knit and they gel. Well, they didn't look like they were close knit when it was every man for himself in the midfield. There was no blocking, there was no shepherding, there was no helping a mate out when the going was tough. And to me, a team who is close knit and playing for each other, when the going gets tough, that's when everyone rolls up their sleeves and gets the job done. Well, they certainly bloody didn't do that on the weekend. Just
a slight digression. Greenwood, there was a rumour that he was going to be upgraded. Has he been upgraded?
Haven't heard anything.
Haven't heard anything, but I wish he would. Surely he's got to come in for a game this weekend. Surely.
Yeah.
That's why I made the... I actually heard some commentator talking about that they'd heard that he is very likely to be upgraded this week, which means if he is going to be upgraded, it means it's probably because he's going to play. I hope so.
Yeah, because if they might have heard because the paperwork would have been lodged recently. It often gets announced around Thursday.
No, we are screaming. I don't know. Look, I don't know whether he's going to have the, I'm not sure what his talent's going to be like, but we are screaming out for somebody that size.
Yeah, we just need another big body. Yeah,
a big body with intent.
Correct.
And one of the players I was really, really disappointed in, amongst others, was Curtly Hampton, who had been that big body and had been a tackling machine and had done, tremendous work in the first 6 games. But another one, just cricket.
Poor game.
And he was just earning his money just on effort. Tackling's just effort. That's not. Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of skill to it, obviously, but 90% of tackling is effort.
Yeah.
In any sport, most sports, anything defensive is all about effort.
Yeah.
And what Hampton's been given in the last 6 weeks is effort, is tackling, and just no effort.
No.
He caught the disease.
So do we see changes, or do we think that Pikey's going to try and let them atone for their sins?
If I hear that bullshit one more time, we'll let them. Talk about they'll find any excuse they can to leave that top 22, 23 players. It's like the old Australian Test cricket team, isn't it?
Yep.
Harder to get out than it is to get in.
Graham Wood syndrome.
Yeah, it is, and surely they must make it. That can't be acceptable. Surely.
No. Personally, I'd have Crouch out, and I'd probably also think about dropping Riley Knight back. I'd definitely have Harry Greenwood in. And I think the other bloke that really deserves a run, even though I don't know exactly where we play him, is John O'Beach.
Yeah, where would you play him?
SNFL, we play him wing and then occasional half forward.
I just think the guy deserves a run. He's been playing really well in the SANFL. He's played well when he's come up in pre-season games and whatnot. I just think the guy deserves to be in, and there's blokes in there based on the last game in particular that don't deserve. See, Tom Lynch might come out, so maybe Beach comes in for Lynch. Who knows? Although they're slightly different players.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that might be his salvation. But as you say, he is a different player. You still need somebody who can really cover, if you're going to take Lynch's place, and you need somebody that can cover a lot of territory.
Surely Pikey's got to look down and say, well, what else have I got here? He didn't do it last year. And then got found out in finals. So surely this year he's going to have a bit of a look and see what else he's got, besides from the obvious selection choices that are made week in, week out.
Well,
true.
My issue...
And our SNFL team doesn't play this weekend either.
My issue there, Pete, is we've got another bloke carrying a groin, I reckon, and that's Charlie Cameron. He had that really good game, or good start to the season, and he had that game a couple of weeks ago where he tweaked it. I think it might have been against Essendon, and he's been quiet ever since. And if he's carrying a groin, we need to arrest the poor bugger, because picking up 14 posies and not being able to move laterally that's his game, Charlie. So I hope we don't do what we did with Luke Brown and actually run him into the deck so that by September he's useless. I'd rather rest him for a month and manage him so that he's actually potent in September.
Well, at his best, he's a weapon, and he's been only half a weapon in the last couple of games.
But if we don't drop him, or if we don't rest him, then that confirms what Pete's fear is, that we're just not willing to test our squad.
Well, unfortunately that has been Pikey's attitude. His argument is that you build a good squad by welding them together by playing a lot all the time, and in principle that's correct. But as a team is a sum of the parts, and some of the parts might not be going as good as others, so then you change those parts.
Now, Pete, you still with us? Yeah, you're still with us. You're going to have to bail. You're going to have to bail, mate. Yeah. Do you have any last thoughts on this particular game?
No, look, I know that I've sounded, absolutely negative, and I know that there's a lot of thought out there that it's a one-off and don't panic, and every team has these games, but nobody expects you to, you do not expect your team to go through a season undefeated. Nobody expects that. And it just doesn't happen, or rarely anyway. And so you're going to have defeats that come along the way. What worries me is the similarity and the propensity to fall into that kind of performance that we saw on Saturday. And we've seen it before, and it was glaringly obvious to me that that this team carries, an inability to respond against a first quarter avalanche, and that was a real worry. That to me is real worry, because that becomes systemic, and once it becomes systemic, then you know that it's going to be repeated. So anyway, that's my last thought.
Just before you go, Pete, can you name in this season so far and the season in 2016, how many games do you reckon we've lost through just being beaten by a better side on the day, and how many games do you reckon we've lost because we haven't shown up? What do you reckon the percentage is?
It's a really, really good question, and you know what? I know that as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back over some games over the last 18 months or so, because I reckon it's a really, really good question. And I can't remember a lot of games where we just got, a team just outlasted us by a couple of points at the end.
Probably Western Bulldogs early last season was the last one I can think of where we just got beaten by a better team on the day.
And look at the West Coast game as well in the last round last year. I mean, that's another example. Just horrible.
Yeah, not turning up. I reckon, apart from that Bulldogs game, every other game we've lost since the beginning of 2016 has been attitudinal, rather than just a game where it was both teams were in it and we just lost.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a really good point.
Anyway,
okay.
Thanks, mate.
I got a bar. Thanks,
we'll
guys.
See you next week.
Yeah. Cheers.
It's here, Pete.
Now, as for the rest of you.
So should we actually go with something a little bit happier and do the cockwomble?
Yeah. Well,
so we can have a bit of a laugh.
Well, let's quickly move on to Melbourne briefly for 5, and then we'll have a bit of a laugh. So, I mean, I honestly think we'll do what the Crows usually do and bounce back, and all will be forgiven. But PJ in the chat and you guys have made some good points. Melbourne are no slouches in the midfield.
No.
No, they're very good midfield.
And even though some people will go, oh, we've bounced back, it doesn't really mean anything, it will actually mean a little something to me, because that midfield has been building for a number of years, and we saw what they did last year when we played them, and they've been building towards it. And I actually think there will be a little bit of redemption depending on how we play up against that midfield, and the way that they use Peterson as well. In the ruck, Pedersen, that he does become that extra midfielder. So that will be interesting to see how the coaching staff will handle that. I thought they did fairly well against Richmond, who tried to do that same kind of thing. So it'll be hopefully a bit of improvement from the coaching staff, and we will hopefully get some improvement from the players.
Bernie's 200th, he'll be fired up.
And we should be fired up to spoil it.
Well, he'll have it'll probably be the Rashudo stand will be full of bloody Stansbury people.
He's asked, I think, for something like 50 tickets. You know,
he's a
really.
I think all of York Peninsula is coming over anyway for his 200th. So that'll be.
Only the small number that support the Crows.
Yeah, that's true. Look, I think we'll win. I think they'll provide us with a test. They're not travelling great either, Melbourne. They should be situated a lot better than they are, but they just seem to similarly have an issue between the years when games are there to be won.
I think it's also what's happened this year, because they've been fixing up the defence. Because that's what Bruce came in to do. He's been fixing up the defence, and you actually hear it from Bolton as well. He's doing the same thing. We're concentrating on our defence. So Goodwin's now taken over because the defence has been sorted, and now he's trying to fix up their forward play. But what that means is they've actually kind of forgotten their defence a bit.
Yeah, but I think, look,
that's what I've seen in the games because I've been watching them this year.
Yeah.
Because
they've been ahead. They've been ahead at crucial times in just about every game that they've lost, and they to me it doesn't look as much structural as it does just for whatever reason they go off the boil, or
they're lapsing.
They don't know how to win or something. But
there's a couple of little spots they've got a little bit lack of quality there. They've got a very good midfield. They've got a good guy up at full forward. And they've got other players dotted around, but they're not at this stage yet. And their defence is fairly sound, but their forward line is a little bit suspect. They go in a lot of times without scoring.
Yeah,
it's PJ Crowe. He's actually said that in the chat, that their forward entries are poor when they've got some good talent up there. So a lot of their scoring comes from perseverance and repeat entries.
Yeah.
That's how it is. Basically, most of it is like that. I watched that game that they lost, and I thought if anything they were probably the better side, but just didn't have that skill and that little finesse up forward to win the game.
And Bernie's actually played awful this season.
Yeah, he hasn't had a good season so far.
No, he's made some really shocking decisions. When we know how good a decision maker he used to be, he's not this year.
Slowed down just a little bit. The elbows are starting to go out quite a bit.
Whether they've changed
proper
up structure a bit.
Footballer.
Yeah, they might have changed systems, and he's not adapting very well. I don't know, but he doesn't look the player he was last season. So our final thoughts: do we think we're going to get up, or we're going to go
bloody better?
I believe we will get up, but maybe not by as much as we should.
Yeah, 5 goals for me, I think.
Yeah.
I'll go with that.
It's hard to come back from a shellacking and smash a team the next week. The actual thing I hope is that every team that plays us from now on looks at the North Melbourne game and looks at last year's Geelong games and brings that every week, because the more we play against that sort of system and that sort of structure and that kind of intent, the more we can actually, perhaps adapt to it, because God knows we need the practice. 4 or 5 goals for me, Nick.
Yeah, I'm about the same.
Yeah, me too.
All right, well, without further ado, I'll play the Cockwomble music. And, Nikki, what do you got for us?
I think we've got a theme going on the Cockwomble this week.
Well, I'd like to nominate Crowcast for Sunday night, and specifically me, for last night's Sunday night stuff up, even though it was beyond my control. I should have tested my equipment earlier, so I put my hand up for a nomination.
I did think initially like our entire football team, but the Cockwomble's supposed to make us laugh, and yeah, that didn't really make us laugh. I think the rest of the AFL, the fact that every single game was decided by the team that was lower on the ladder, that was just ridiculous with what happened.
Quite fortuitous for us.
Yeah, thank you to West Coast and Gold Coast. I quite enjoyed my Saturday night after a really horrible... and the Bulldogs, that helped too.
Yeah.
So that actually made me feel slightly better. But I think we need to have a bit of discussion about a few of the things that are going on with people going to China leaving tomorrow.
Let's have a talk.
So we can start off with the AFLPA, who don't really seem to mind that the fact that there's this smog and people can't run around in it, and the actual official government advice is not to exert yourself in that kind of weather, and our game is all about exerting yourself. They
play soccer there every week.
Yeah, but they're used to that.
No. They're still human beings. They've still got lungs and stuff.
They are. But we're coming from a completely different environment. So there should be a little bit of an issue there. But no, the AFLPA are very upset because they didn't get the players upgraded to premium economy so they could have a little bit more leg room.
Oh, no, wait. Only the Gold Coast players.
Oh,
correct.
Yeah.
Poor are going over in bloody business class, but poor old 2 metre Peters in the bloody gantry down the back.
So that was kind of amusing. The fact that the AFL actually has no China television thing lined up, so it's not even going to be shown in China. They're going to have no idea what's going on. Well done.
Is that right? There's actually no TV coverage?
There is no TV coverage in China.
Makes the whole game bullshit.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
as PJ Crows has pointed out, there's only 11,000 tickets that are sold, but 3,500 were given by one Chinese sponsor to give away.
Well, and 5,000 Port supporters are going over. So that's
probably about the crowd number.
Well, that's serving no purpose. You know, what they're trying to get is locals involved. But essentially, you've got half the ground's going to be filled up by travellers.
Well, there's a lot of freebies being given because my son and one of his mates, due to their positions in the company, they've been given free trips over there as free junkets to go to the game.
I think it's just basically one big cockwomble. I mean, to go back from the very, very start, it's given us a shitload of mirth all the way through, and it's just been one disaster after the other. And now you've got Burgess going, oh, they're not allowed to eat outside the hotel because I've had to go and source their own food, which, you know, fair enough. Because what's the Chinese version of Delhi Belly?
I don't know. China syndrome? I don't know.
Yeah. So they're not allowed to actually go out and experience a bit of the real China. They're going to be stuck in the hotel and they're like, you're not allowed to go anywhere. That's no fun.
Well, you know, they didn't succeed in getting the Gold Coast not to wear the Chinese national colours. That's another little thing. And then on top of that, if they actually lost the game, what a fiasco.
Well, and they're no guarantee to win it.
No, they are no guarantee to win it, but I think Gold Coast have helped them out by 3 particular players not going over there.
Well, who was it? Swallow and 2 others.
Who's the one who actually scored all the goals against us? Wasn't that Archie?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not gone.
Yeah, Archie.
And he played well also this week against Geelong.
Yeah, but let's face it, then Gold Coast are going to go over there and try and win as well. So those players are legitimately not picked for whatever reason. You know, Gold Coast are in the hunt for a top 8 berth this year, and Rockets, you know, he's in the gun. So they'll be going over with the intent to win.
And they do have quite a good forward line, which is going to be a bit of a worry for that Port defence.
Just excuse me, Vardy Magic wins the internet with Dim Syndrome. Very good.
Well done. And that's Syndrome with SIM, of course. So I just figure that this whole China game and everything else that's around it, and when you've got Gil McLaughlin, they ask him, you know, what's the contingency if it actually does get too high, and there are other warnings and everything else is like, oh, we do kind of, we might have some plans, in place, yeah, well done, Gil.
The interesting thing is about this particular game is there's one of 2 things will happen. That in years to come, they'll either look back and say, look, they were pioneers and thank God they tried it and something's good happened out of it. Or alternatively, they'll look back and say, shit, what a mob of, I won't use any swear word, but dickheads they were.
Well,
I think it'll be a trivia question.
Yeah, if we can't get a thing going up in New Zealand, Macca, we're not going to get anything going anywhere else. And I think I made a post on the Big Footy boards today, and like I honestly believe that any sort of competition needs to grow from the bottom up and be demand driven, and just like the NFL have been playing matches for points in London for the last few years, and they've failed to make any inroads in that soccer mad country. It may be good for tourism. It may be good for corporate interests or what have you. I wouldn't know. I'm not involved. But in terms of promoting AFL, I think it's pointless, particularly if there's no televised coverage.
Well, I have to agree.
Yeah, I think that is the ultimate thing, that they're playing a game in China and nobody's showing it. It's the ultimate cockwomble.
Yeah, it's an amazing situation.
So you're going to get, maybe 5,000, at absolute most, you're going to get 5,000 Chinese people there.
No, you don't know. There's already about 5,000 going over from here, and there's about another 4,000 Aussies living in China who have booked seats for it as well.
Yeah,
that's about. So at a maximum, maybe 1 to 2,000.
Well, the capacity's 15, I think, isn't it?
And
12
that'll
or
be
15?
school
11.
kids.
11.
11, is it? I thought it was more than that.
Nah.
No, 11, I think.
Well, in any case, you're going to get a handful of Chinese people there. So what are you trying to promote, really? It is just a junket.
Well, I see it as an absolute junket.
And it could really have a major impact on Port season, let alone Gold Coast for a moment. But let's talk about Port season. They're well and truly in the hunt.
Yeah.
And this has been a focus now for a few weeks. Travis Boak has said that he isn't right, but he wants to get through the China game before
And
he has
he's
it.
an asthmatic.
Exactly. So, there's that issue. I will be interested to see not only how it affects them during the game, but the whole 22-hour travel there and back, irrespective of the fact that they've got an early bye. I can see that having an impact on them for the following couple of weeks.
Yeah, it is going to be very interesting to watch.
Nicky, the point you raised about asthmatic is very, very relevant because my son in his role has been a business role, actually does deal with the Chinese, and he's been up there many, many times. And he tells me that the visibility, because of the smog, is at best 1 kilometre, at very, very best.
Is he ever go to Shanghai, though, Macca, or is he more Beijing?
No, he's been to Shanghai.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of business there.
Yeah.
So he's going up as part of a junket all paid for him, but he thinks it's a joke.
And the thing is, we've actually seen, we played a game in Dubai, we've had games in London. It's mostly the expats that turn up.
It's always the expats. In New Zealand, all the expats turned up, and they get AFL on their TV every weekend, the New Zealanders, and yet it still doesn't catch on enough there. I'm struggling.
You're not taking rugby away from the Kiwis.
No, but they play soccer. They enjoy soccer. I mean, there is if there's demand, there'll be uptake, but there just isn't demand for AFL because it's still too much of a complicated sport for newcomers to embrace, and that's why if you want football in other countries, you've actually got to grow it at the grassroots level and build demand that way, because coming in over the top of other sports that have been established for a long, long time, you're just going to be an oddity or a once-off piece of entertainment. You've got to have the kids coming up and then forming competitions as they grow older and so on and so forth.
And the other thing I was going to say there, Phoenix, is that you're quite right. But there's another restrictive factor about it, even if there were to be the interest. It's the fact that there isn't the capacity for grounds there because of the fact that AFL footy's played on pretty big ground, and they've had to get this particular ground that's got a combination of soccer and athletics, and the majority of grounds won't have that. So this is a bit of a unique. In fact, they only could identify 2 sites that were possible sites to play this particular game. So I just don't see how it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening with interest to SEN this morning, and they had a caller, an expat Aussie living in Shanghai, who was a school teacher over there. And he said, they do Auskick clinics and all the rest of it, and there is actually quite a bit of interest from the Chinese kids in the game. So, I mean, I don't there's no harm in going over there and doing it. What I fail to see, and including the corporate aspect of it, I just don't see the benefit for the outlay. I don't see the return on investment. I just don't. It doesn't strike me as something that's going to be a net gain for the AFL, the clubs involved, or the broader community, really.
Port Adelaide are saying that they've got the it's a $4 million cost, and they're saying that they've got this sponsored by local Chinese businessmen, but without giving any details of who they are. I just hope that at the end of the season that is not fictional, and then they only come up with, say, $2 million or something like that, and the AFL's got to foot the rest of it, because that's just a waste of money then. I
think it's a waste of money anyway. I mean, Port are talking about, it being a conduit to business and all the rest of it. There's enough of those conduits already at government level and, with tourism boards and other chambers of commerce. We don't need a football club facilitating business ties between the two countries. And, given who's at the head of that football club, it just makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, I've got other mates that go over regularly with the government trips, etc., for business purposes, and the Chamber of Commerce and all that sort of stuff. And even then, it's really hard for them to do business because these guys, they want to be the winners in any deal that's done, they are very, very hard businessmen to deal with. And to think that a footy club can do it better, no thanks.
Any other nominations, Nikki?
No, I just thought there was just a whole lot to do with the whole China game.
Yeah,
There was just too many to pick from, so I just thought the whole thing.
Well, I think that, critical mass probably wins out there, and there's probably about 6 Cockwomble nominations in amongst all that lot, so we'll go with them, won't we?
That'll do.
Very good. Well, that's it for our mega...
An
epic,
hour and a half?
Almost. 1 hour 20. So we're all thinking Adelaide in a reasonably tight game on the weekend. Don't forget to listen to Scorpus and myself on Thursday night for team selections.
That will be interesting.
That will be interesting to see what sort of response the club gives. And I'll tell you what, I'll be disappointed if we don't see a couple of unforced changes, to be honest. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at AFL Crowcast. As I said, Scorpus will be back on Thursday night. I will be back after a couple of weeks hiatus with a halftime show. And touch wood, the rap show will be back on Sunday night. Barring any further unforeseen circumstances. So I want to thank everyone that has put up with tonight. Or not put up with it, but stuck with us. It's been a long one, but we just felt that missing out on Sunday warranted a bit extra discussion. So thanks, Macca. Thanks, Nikki.
I think we had some anger to get out.
Well,
It was very cathartic.
I certainly feel better for the run.
And the interesting thing is that even though we all watched the same game, we've all got different opinions on it. But one thing that we do have in common, we did think it was a very poor effort.
Yeah,
Yep.
very true, Macca.
Not
And
acceptable.
On that note, we will say goodnight and see you on Thursday.
Yeah, good night all.
See ya.